The rifle cracked across the wide Montana plains, and Cole Dawson lowered the barrel, watching the wild turkey drop lifeless into the tall grass. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. That bird would keep him and his boy fed for days. The year was 1878, and Montana still felt raw, endless, and unforgiving, just as it had when he first came west with Annabelle, his young bride full of bright dreams. Now those dreams rested beneath a rough wooden cross behind the cabin, beside the tiny daughter who had followed her mother into the grave 2 winters past. "Nice shot, Pa," 7-year-old Luke said quietly, his sandy hair falling across a face too serious for his age. Grief had made him grow up faster than he should have. "Thanks, son." Cole ruffled his boy's hair, though it hurt to look into those blue eyes, Annabelle's eyes clear as a summer sky. "Let's get this bird home before the sun goes down." The ride back to the ranch was silent, like most of their days. Their cabin stood against the pines at the foot of the hills, with a weathered barn, a horse corral, and thin fields that Cole coaxed to yield what crops they could. It wasn't much, but it was theirs built by his hands, and Annabelle's vision. As they rode in, Cole's eyes narrowed at the sight of a wagon near the porch. Visitors were rare this far out, nearly 20 miles from Pinecrest. "Pa? Who's that?" Luke asked, pointing at the woman standing on their porch, shading her eyes against the sun. Cole's hand slid instinctively toward the colt at his hip. "Stay behind me," he muttered. Montana had taught him caution the hard way. The woman stepped forward as they drew near. Her dress was plain dusty from the trail, chestnut hair pinned back in a bun. She held herself upright, though there was hesitation in her stance. "Mr. Dawson," she called, as they stopped at the hitching post. "I'm sorry to trouble you." Cole dismounted, lifting Luke down. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "my name is Clara Monroe." She offered her hand, which he shook reluctantly. Up close, she looked mid-20s, eyes the color of amber, jaw set with quiet resolve. "I've come from St. Louis," she explained. "I'm looking for work, and in town they said you might need help." "Who told you that?" Cole asked, his frown deepening. "Caleb Thornton at the general store." Her eyes flicked toward Luke, who was half hidden behind Cole's leg. She softened with a smile. "Hello there." Normally Luke kept to himself around strangers, but he peeked out and whispered, "Hello, ma'am." Cole's jaw tightened. Thornton had been pushing the notion that he needed a woman around the place. The last thing he wanted was Pinecrest gossip meddling in his life. "Miss Monroe." "Mrs.," she corrected softly. "Though my husband passed 2 years ago." Seeing Cole's expression harden, she hurried to add, "I'm not asking for charity. I can work. I can cook, clean, keep a garden. I used to teach school. I thought maybe your boy might benefit." Luke's hand tightened in his father's. Cole knew all too well the boy lacked proper schooling. Annabelle had taught him what she could, but since her passing, Cole had done his best, which wasn't nearly enough. The weight of that failure pressed hard on him. "We get along fine on our own," he said gruffly. "Of course," she answered gently. Her eyes darted to the wagon. "I'll be on my way then. Thank you for your time." She turned to leave. But Luke suddenly piped up, "Pa, maybe she could eat supper with us before going back to town. It's getting dark." Cole blinked in surprise. His son rarely spoke so openly to strangers. "That's kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude," Clara said. The sun was already bleeding orange and pink across the sky. The road back to Pinecrest was rough even in daylight with wolves, and worse after dark. Cole's voice came slower than his thoughts. "The boy's right. Road's no place to be at night. You can stay here till morning." Relief crossed her face. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I'll be glad to earn my supper by cooking it." Before Cole could reply, Luke was already tugging at her sleeve. Come on, ma'am. I'll show you where Pa keeps the vegetables. Cole stood in the doorway, uneasy, watching the stranger move about the kitchen, an hour later, slicing potatoes, tending the turkey he'd shot. It had been so long since a woman's touch had filled the cabin that it felt like reopening an old wound. Yet as the smell of a real meal drifted through the house, he couldn't deny the comfort it brought. His own cooking was plain survival. Hers brought warmth. "Mr. Dawson," Clara said, as she set a steaming plate before him. "If I may ask, how long have you been in Montana? 5 years?" he replied, noticing how she cut Luke's meat into small bites with quiet care. "Came west from Pennsylvania after the war. Built this place myself." "With your wife?" Clara asked gently. Cole nodded, tasting the turkey. Tender, seasoned, better than he'd managed in months. Annabelle and I built it together. She had an eye for making a house feel like home. At the mention of his mother, Luke grew silent, eyes fixed on his plate. "It's a fine home," Clara said softly. "You've done well out here?" Her words, simple as they were, struck Cole deeper than he cared to admit. The simple kindness in her words should have been nothing. Yet Cole Dawson felt an ache he hadn't expected. Since Annabelle's passing, the ranch had slipped into quiet ruin, the once thriving garden smothered by weeds. The curtains she'd stitched now faded and torn, the little touches that had made it a home hidden away because he couldn't bear to see them. "May I ask what happened to your husband, Mrs. Monroe?" Cole said, and almost wished he hadn't, as a shadow crossed her face. "Samuel was a carpenter," Clara answered softly. "There was an accident. A timber came down on him. It was over in an instant." She tried to smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I went back to teaching for a while, but I needed to start over. Papers back east spoke of chances out here." Cole knew all too well the urge to flee memories that refused to loosen their grip. "And Pinecrest?" he asked. "My cousin Evelyn Pike has been here for 10 years. She and her husband Roy ran the boarding house." Clara's fingers twisted the napkin in her lap. "But when I arrived last week, I found out they'd sold the place and were bound for Oregon. They asked me to come with them, but—" "You don't want to?" Luke interrupted, surprising both adults. Clara's smile warmed as she looked at him. "That's right. I came west to build something of my own, not to chase someone else's dream." Her resolve struck something in Cole, something that reminded him of Annabelle's grit in those first hard years, when she'd believed they could carve a place for themselves in this wild land. After supper, Clara washed dishes, despite Cole insisting she was a guest. Luke brought out his slate, eager to show off his letters and numbers. Clara bent beside him, praising each mark with a patience and gentleness that pierced Cole's chest. His boy needed more than Cole alone could give. Later, with Luke tucked into bed, Clara unrolled a blanket by the fire, refusing his offer of the bed. Cole sat outside on the porch, watching the stars when the door creaked. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly. He nodded, shifting to make space. They sat in silence, the night filled with crickets, a coyote's lonely call, the soft shuffle of horses in the barn. "Your son is a bright boy," Clara said at last. "He is." Pride swelled in Cole's voice. "Got that from his mama. He must miss her." Cole's throat tightened. "We both do." She didn't offer hollow words of comfort. Instead, she said, "I know I'm a stranger, Mr. Dawson, but my offer was real. I need work, and it seems clear you could use help not just with the house, but with Luke's schooling." The moonlight caught her profile, outlining her quiet strength. She wasn't searching for a husband, nor trying to take Annabelle's place. She was someone like him who'd been broken and was trying to start again. "I can't pay much," Cole admitted the words, surprising even himself. Her eyes widened slightly. "Are you saying 1-month trial run? Room, board, and $2 a week. If it doesn't fit, it will." She cut in with quiet certainty. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. You won't regret it. Her smile this time reached her amber eyes, brightening her face in a way that unsettled him. Another woman inside Anna Bell's home felt wrong, even disloyal. But when he thought of Luke's joy at showing his letters, maybe it was worth a try. We start early, he warned. First light. I've never shied from work. She stood smoothing her skirt. Good night, then, and thank you for the chance. Cole stayed on the porch long after she'd gone inside, staring at the wide Montana sky. Something had been set in motion, and he wasn't sure he could stop it. In the moonlight, Anna Bell's neglected flower bed caught his eye, overgrown, yet stubbornly trying to bloom. Maybe it was time to let something new take root. The first week with Clara Monroe blurred by. Cole was always aware of her presence, the light steps through the cabin, the gentle hum of her voice as she guided Luke through lessons. She cleared out the cramped storeroom by the kitchen, turned it into a modest bedroom, efficient and tidy. By the third day, she'd surveyed their pantry and handed Cole a neat list for the store. These are the things we need right away, she explained, and he noticed the word we. More surprising was how easily he accepted it. I'll head into Pinecrest tomorrow, Cole said, tucking the list into his pocket. Luke can stay here with you. Of course, she said, kneading bread. We'll keep on with his sums while you're gone. Luke, who had grown so withdrawn, now shadowed her steps, hungry for her attention. Each morning after breakfast, she taught him letters and numbers before turning him loose to help his father. Evenings, she read aloud from a book of adventures she'd carried from St. Louis. One night a week after her arrival, Cole watched her by lamplight as she read. The glow caught the auburn in her hair, her animated expressions bringing the story alive, Luke leaning in spellbound. Something shifted in Cole's chest. Not grief, not guilt, but a warmth he'd thought long buried. The lamplight flickered across Clara Monroe's hair, catching streaks of auburn as her voice rose and fell, bringing the old tale alive. Luke sat pressed against her side, his small face glowing with wonder, eyes wide, as if the story itself breathed through her. Cole Dawson felt something stir in his chest, not the heavy ache of grief, not the guilt that so often haunted him, but a faint warmth he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Cole saddled his horse and rode into Pinecrest alone. The town was humming with noise, a cattle drive having spilled a rough crowd into the streets. He tied off at Caleb Thornton's store and stepped inside list in hand. Cole Dawson, Thornton greeted, leaning on the counter with a grin. Was starting to think you'd fallen clean off the edge of the map. Cole's jaw tightened. So it was you who sent Mrs. Monroe out my way. Thornton shrugged, unapologetic. Whole town's been whispering you're raising that boy alone, letting your place slide into ruin. Woman came asking for work, looked to me like Providence lending a hand. We were managing fine, Cole said sharply, passing the list across. Thornton's brows shot up. This ain't your writing. Baking soda vanilla fabric for curtains. Looks like somebody's setting your place to rights. She's not. Cole cut himself short. She's helping with Luke's schooling. Nothing more. If you say so. Thornton started pulling items from the shelves. Evelyn Pike swears she's a good woman. Widowed young, no children of her own. Shame that. Cole ignored the pointed look. Just the supplies. The bell over the door clanged as two drovers swaggered in. Cole knew the type. Hard men, half drunk, spoiling for trouble. Well, well, the taller one drawled. A homesteader dressed up for town. Cole kept his eyes on the counter. Hey, farmer, I'm talking to you. The man pushed whiskey heavy on his breath. I've got no quarrel, Cole answered steady without turning. His companion snorted. Cattle's the only business worth a damn out here. Rest of you are just playing house. Now, fellas, Thornton said nervously, Mr. Dawson's one of our most respected ranchers. The tall drover spat on the floor. Rancher. He's got what 10 head, that ain't no ranch. Cole calmly paid for his goods, slid them into his saddlebag, and started for the door. The drover stepped into his path. Don't walk off when I'm talking to you, dirt farmer. Move aside, Cole said, low steel in his tone. The air crackled for a moment until the second man tugged his friend's sleeve. Come on, Hank. Ain't worth it. Hank Dobbs glared hard, then stepped aside with mock courtesy. Better watch yourself, rancher. Open range belongs to cattle, not men playing house with their brats. Cole gave no answer, just walked past, shoulders square. Only once he was in the saddle and out of town did he let himself exhale. The encounter left him unsettled not for himself, but for what it meant. The West was shifting, and fights between homesteaders and cattle outfits were growing bloodier. He thought of Luke, and of Clara waiting back at the ranch. He pressed his horse faster. When home came into view, Cole almost didn't recognize it. The porch was swept clean, windows gleamed, laundry fluttered on the line, Luke's shirts beside Clara's simple dresses. Out in Annabelle's old garden, Clara and Luke knelt side by side, pulling weeds from stubborn plants that had clung to life. Cole drew his horse to a halt, breath catching. The sight was so familiar it nearly broke him. Annabelle had once knelt in that same soil, her belly round with child, showing little Luke how to pat earth around a seedling. Luke spotted him and sprang up, waving. Paws back, Clara rose gracefully, brushing dirt from her apron. Welcome home, Mr. Dawson. Hopetown was kind to you. It was, Cole said, dismounting and leading his horse toward the barn. Luke darted to his side, chattering about the garden. Mrs. Clara says the roses might bloom again if we tend 'em right. We even found bulbs still good, they'll sprout come spring. Cole's eyes flicked to Clara as she walked up. You didn't have to take on the garden, he said. That wasn't part of the deal. Luke wanted to, she answered simply. He told me his mother loved flowers, especially the yellow roses. Her cheeks flushed faintly. I thought it might be nice to bring them back, in her memory. The tenderness of the gesture stopped Cole Dawson cold. Most folks avoided speaking Annabelle's name, afraid to stir the hurt that lived under his skin. But Clara Monroe seemed to understand that holding on to those memories, especially for Luke, mattered more than silence. I don't mind, Cole said, voice rougher than he meant. Annabelle would have liked that. Something flickered between them, a wordless understanding that rattled him more than he cared to admit. He quickly shifted focus, unloading supplies. Got everything you listed, he muttered, passing her the parcels. Their fingers brushed for the briefest second, and Cole jerked his hand back as though burned. There's fabric for curtains, too, he added. Clara's smile brightened her whole face. Thank you. The old ones have surely seen better days. I thought maybe new curtains would bring a bit of light back in. You don't need to clear every change with me, Cole said, before he realized it. While you're here, treat the house as your own to manage. Her expression softened. That means more than you know, Mr. Dawson. Thank you. As they walked toward the cabin, Cole told her about the run-in at town. Cattle drives passing through. Some of the drovers were stirring trouble. Clara's face tensed. Nothing serious, he assured quickly, but best you and Luke stay put until they're gone. Of course. We've got plenty here to keep us busy. That evening, after a supper of rabbit stew that far outshone his own cooking, Clara brought out a chessboard he hadn't seen in years. Found this in a trunk in the attic while looking for blankets, she explained. Do you play Mr. Dawson? I used to, Cole admitted. Annabelle never had much patience for it. Will you teach me? Pa Luke asked eagerly. Mrs. Clara says it's good for learning strategy. If you'd like, Cole said, surprised by his son's interest. But it's late tomorrow? Clara smiled. I already promised him apple dumplings after lessons tomorrow. Chess can be your time together in the evening. Cole studied her across the lamplight, struck once more by her intuition. She wasn't just helping with chores. She was giving him and Luke new ground to stand on. That sounds fine, he agreed. Her amber eyes seemed to glow with the warmth of the lamp. For the first time in years, the cabin felt like a home. That realization was as frightening as it was comforting. Later, with Luke asleep and Clara in her small room, Cole sat by the fire, a folded letter in his hand, the one he'd received in town. He'd been thinking on it before Clara arrived, wondering if it was time to leave this land behind. But now, seeing his boy's newfound spirit, he fed the paper to the flames. For now they would stay. The days settled into rhythm. Cole rose before dawn to tend the stock, often finding Clara already at the stove, coffee steaming. Their talk at the table grew easier with each morning. By May, the meadows were thick with wildflowers, trees heavy with new leaf. Under Clara's care, Annabelle's garden began to bloom again. One morning, returning from checking a heifer close to calving, Cole found Clara on her knees in the soil, hair falling loose from its bun, cheeks flushed as she dug a new patch for vegetables. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, crouching down beside her. "This ain't part of your wages." "I like it," she said simply, brushing dirt from her cheek and leaving a streak behind. "Besides, a good garden saves money at Thornton's store." Without thinking, Cole reached out and wiped the smudge away with his thumb. The instant he touched her skin, he froze. Clara's breath caught her eyes wide. "Sorry," he muttered, drawing back. "You had dirt there." "It's all right," she said softly. Their eyes lingered longer than either intended, before she turned back to her tools. "Luke's done with his reading. He's waiting by the corral, says something about checking fence lines. I'll take him," Cole said quickly, rising to his feet. As he walked off, he could feel her gaze at his back. Something long buried stirred inside him, a yearning he wasn't ready to name. The fence work with Luke took longer than expected. Winter storms had broken posts and torn rails. By the time they finished, the sun was already dropping. Pa Luke asked as they rode side by side. "Do you like Mrs. Clara?" "Caught off guard," Cole said carefully. "She's been a fine teacher for you. A big help around here?" Luke frowned, shaking his head impatiently. "That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Do you like her?" Luke pressed his voice, carrying the stubborn edge of a boy who wanted a straight answer. Cole Dawson reined in, slightly weighing his words. "Yes, I do. She's kind, hardworking." "Why do you ask?" "Because I like her too," Luke said simply. "And I was thinking, maybe she could stay. Not just for a little while, for good." A storm of feelings washed through Cole, alarm guilt, and something unnamed he wasn't ready to face. "Luke, Mrs. Monroe is working here. This isn't her home. But it could be the boy insisted. She told me she likes it here." "It's not that simple, son." Luke's voice softened. Because of Mama, Cole drew his horse to a stop and motioned for Luke to do the same. He turned toward him fully, his tone grave. "Your mama will always be your mama. Nothing and no one will ever change that." "You understand?" Luke nodded solemnly. Cole went on, choosing every word carefully. "But that doesn't mean our hearts can't make room for other folks. Mrs. Monroe has been good for us." "That's true. So she can stay." Cole exhaled, long and heavy. "That's up to her, Luke. She may have plans of her own." Luke seemed to accept that, but as they rode on, Cole's thoughts twisted. He'd been so wrapped up in his own unease about Clara's presence that he hadn't considered what her leaving would mean for Luke, who was already growing attached. The smell of fresh bread drifted on the breeze as they neared the cabin. Through the window, Cole glimpsed Clara moving about the kitchen, the scene so warm, so homelike, it caught him square in the chest. "Race you to the barn," Pa Luke hollered, spurring his pony forward. Cole let him win, watching with quiet pride as his son sat taller in the saddle, more confident than he'd been in months. Clara's influence ran deeper than lessons on a slate. It was reshaping their lives. After the horses were tended, father and son walked toward the house together. Evening light painted the cabin gold, making it seem almost enchanted. Clara met them on the porch, apron tied at her waist, worry in her eyes. "I was beginning to wonder," she said, scanning both of them, as though to be sure they were whole. "Supper's ready." "Sorry we're late," Cole replied. "Fence line was worse than I thought." "No trouble," she said with a smile that wrapped them both in its warmth. "Everything's kept hot." Her gaze lingered on Cole, just long enough to quicken his pulse. Inside the table was laid with mismatched dishes, yet arranged with care that made it feel special. Wildflowers stood in a jar at the center. Her new yellow curtains framed the windows, brightening the room. Over supper, Luke chattered non-stop about their day, and Cole found himself speaking more freely, too, answering Clara's thoughtful questions. "The cattle drive should be past Pinecrest by now," Cole said, as they finished off Clara's apple cobbler. "I'll need to ride in tomorrow for fence supplies. Might be good for both of you to come along. Change of scenery." Clara's eyes lit up. "I'd love that. There are a few things I could use from the store, and Luke has worked so hard on his lessons he deserves a treat." "Can I have a candy stick from Mr. Thornton's pa?" Luke asked eagerly. "If you help with dishes tonight without complaint, you've earned it," Cole said with a grin. The boy sprang from the table to clear the plates. Later, after Luke was asleep, Cole stepped out onto the porch and found Clara already there, gazing at the stars. Her hair was loose, tumbling past her shoulders in waves longer than he'd realized. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, echoing her words from that first night. She smiled, shifting over. "It's your porch, Mr. Dawson." "Cole," he said suddenly. "If we're working side by side, you might as well use my name." Her smile deepened. "Cole," she repeated softly, as though testing the sound. "Then you must call me Clara." "Clara?" He agreed, the name settling naturally on his tongue. They sat together in companionable silence, listening to crickets and the faint rustle of the prairie wind. At last, Cole said, "Luke asked me today if you could stay here, permanently." He felt her tense beside him. "I told him that would be your choice, that you may have plans of your own." Clara was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Truth is, I don't have firm plans. Just wanted honest work, a chance to build a life. These weeks here with you and Luke, they've been good to me. Better than I hoped for." She turned to him, eyes earnest in the moonlight. "I feel useful here. Wanted." "You've been good for us too," Cole admitted. "Especially Luke. I haven't seen him this happy in a long time." "He's a wonderful boy," she said warmly. "You've done well raising him alone." The words touched something deep in Cole. "I've done my best. But there are things a boy needs I can't give. The education you're giving him, that means more than you know." "It's my pleasure," Clara replied softly. Their eyes locked, and Cole suddenly became keenly aware of how close she was, of the faint floral scent that seemed to cling to her. The silence between them brimmed with something unspoken, something dangerous and undeniable. For a fleeting, reckless second, Cole Dawson wondered what it would be like to close the gap between them, to taste Clara Monroe's lips in the quiet night air. The thought rattled him so deeply he stood abruptly. "It's late. Best we get some rest if we're riding to town tomorrow." If Clara was disappointed, she hid it well. "Of course. Good night, Cole." "Good night, Clara." But as he lay awake in the dark, the walls seemed to echo with both memory and possibility. Annabelle's presence still lived in every corner, yet Clara's warmth lingered too, and the two tangled inside him until he couldn't tell where grief ended and something new began. Morning light crept through the window far too soon. Rising. Cole was startled to find Luke, already awake, bustling about the kitchen with Clara. "Somebody's eager for that candy stick," Cole remarked, tousling his son's hair as Clara handed him a steaming cup of coffee. The ride into Pinecrest was pleasant. Luke rode between them, pointing out a hawk circling high above a rabbit bolting into the brush, and naming wildflowers he'd learned from Clara. By the time they arrived, the town was buzzing. Wagons lined the street settlers milling about outside Caleb Thornton's general store. "Looks like something's going on," Cole muttered as he tied off his horse. "The Pikes mentioned a supply train was due," Clara said. "Perhaps it's finally here." Inside the crowd confirmed her guess. Settlers had gathered for goods long delayed by spring mudslides. Dawson Thornton called over the din. "Be right with you. Got your fence supplies set aside." Cole nodded, then turned to Clara and Luke. "Why don't you two look around while I settle up Luke pick your candy?" As they moved off, Cole watched them, Clara leaning down to show Luke a bolt of fabric, the boy's hand resting easily in hers. The sight brought an unexpected ache to his chest. "That's a fine woman you've got there," Dawson Thornton said, appearing beside him with the bundled supplies. "Good with the boy, too." "She's not mine," Cole said stiffly. "She's his teacher." Thornton raised a skeptical brow. "If you say so. But let me give you a word from a man who's been married near 30 years. When Providence hands you a gift, don't be blind to it." Before Cole could answer, a commotion at the door turned heads. Hank Dobbs stumbled inside with Jed Crow and Silas McGraw at his heels, all three drunk despite the early hour. "Thought that cattle drive had moved on," muttered. "Main herd did," Thornton replied low. "These three got themselves fired. Been drinking up their last pay at the saloon since." Cole's eyes found Clara and Luke in the far corner, bent over fabric. He started toward them, intending to slip out the back, but Hank spotted him. "Well, if it ain't the dirt farmer," Hank slurred, staggering into Cole's path. His gaze slid past him to Clara. "And this time, you brought the woman. Pretty little thing." "Step aside," Cole said evenly, though every muscle coiled tight, or what Hank sneered, swaying on his feet. "You gonna make me—" One of his companions tugged his sleeve. "Let it go, Hank. Ain't worth landing in jail." But Hank shook him off, leering toward Clara, who had instinctively moved in front of Luke. "A lady like that don't belong in a sodbuster's shack," Hank drawled. "What do you say, sweetheart? Want to see what a real man can give you?" Cole's patience snapped. In a heartbeat, he had Hank by the collar, driving him back toward the door. "You'll apologize to the lady," he growled, "and then you'll leave." Shock flared in Hank's eyes before rage took over. He broke Cole's grip and swung his drunken fist easy to dodge. Years of ranch work had kept Cole sharp, while whiskey had dulled Hank's edge. Enough Thornton barked, but neither man heard. Hank lunged again. This time Cole answered with a hard punch that sent the drover sprawling into his friends. Jed and Silas caught him, then stepped forward, turning the scuffle into something more dangerous. Clara's voice cut through the tension. She'd pushed Luke behind her, fear wide in her eyes. That sight cooled Cole's blood. He wasn't that man anymore, wasn't about to brawl like some reckless youth, not with his boy watching. He stepped back deliberately, hands raised. "Not worth it. We're leaving." "That's right, run," Hank taunted, blood streaking his lip. "Hide behind your woman's skirts." Cole ignored him, turning to Clara and Luke. "Let's go." But Jed moved to block their way. "Not so fast. Hank ain't finished." "I think he is," came a firm, familiar voice. Marshal Seth Carver stood in the doorway, hand resting on his pistol. "Hank, you and your pals will be on the next stage out. Leaves in 1 hour." "You can't run us out of town," Hank snarled. Watch me, Carver said flatly. 1 hour or you rot in my jail for disturbing the peace. The fight drained out of them. Muttering curses, the three slunk out. Cole let out a breath and put an arm around Luke's shoulders. Thank you, Marshal, he said quietly. Carver tipped his hat. No trouble, Dawson. Just keep clear of the likes of them. Those boys have been nothing but trouble since the herd moved on. Marshal Seth Carver tipped his hat to Clara Monroe before stepping out. Once the lawman was gone, Cole Dawson turned to her, concern etched deep in his face. You all right? She nodded, though her face was pale. I'm fine. Luke, are you? The boy gave a solemn nod. Pa was brave, he said softly, gazing up at his father with wide-eyed admiration that squeezed Cole's chest. Let's finish up and get home, Cole said gently. They wrapped up their purchases quickly, the laughter and lightness of earlier gone, replaced with a sober quiet. As they rode out of Pinecrest, Cole kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting Hank Dobbs and his friends to come trailing after. But the road stayed empty. Luke, resilient as boys often are, was soon chattering again, candy stick in his mouth, talking about a book he'd spotted and hoped to read one day. Clara, though, stayed quiet, thoughtful. Riding beside her, Cole finally broke the silence. I'm sorry for what happened back there. They had no right speaking to you that way. You don't need to apologize, she said, offering a small smile that softened her face. If anything, I should thank you. Not everyone would have stood their ground like that. Plenty would, Cole muttered. No, she said firmly. It takes courage to face men like that, especially outnumbered. You showed Luke what it means to stand tall. That's worth something. The words warmed him, though guilt lingered. I shouldn't have taken the bait. Not with Luke watching. You didn't start that fight, Clara reminded him. And you ended it before it got worse. There's a lesson in that, too. They rode on in silence. Spring sunlight warming their backs. Mountains standing proud in the distance. Clara's gaze swept the valley. It's beautiful here. I can see why you chose it. Annabelle chose it, Cole said quietly. We looked at plenty of land, but when we crested that ridge and saw this valley, she just knew. Said she could see our whole future here. Instead of the sharp stab of grief, the memory brought a gentler ache. Sharing it with Clara felt right. She must have been remarkable, Clara said softly. She was. Cole replied, eyes shifting to Luke, riding ahead. In the boy's straight shoulders and determined grip on the reins, he saw his mother. Strong and gentle both. She never complained even that first winter when all we had was a lean-to and hope. Luke has her strength, Clara said with quiet conviction. And yours. The simple truth in her words struck him deep. Thank you. As they neared the ranch, the cabin came into view brighter than he'd remembered it since Annabelle passed. Clara's yellow curtains glowed in the windows, and the garden, though just beginning to heal, already added life and color. It looks like home, he murmured, without realizing until Clara's eyes turned to him with a question. It is home, she said gently. That night, sleep refused him. Not because of Hank Dobbs, but because of the moment he'd seen Clara and Luke together and realized the family they could be. Stepping outside, he found the garden glowing silver under the full moon. To his surprise, Clara was already on the porch, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She turned at the sound of his boots, and for a heartbeat they just looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Couldn't sleep, she asked. He shook his head, joining her at the railing. Too much on my mind. Me too, she said, gazing out across the moonlit yard. What happened in town? It reminded me how fragile peace is, how quickly it can be stolen. Those men won't trouble us again, Cole assured her. Marshal Carver will see to it. It's not just them, Clara said, turning toward him. When Samuel died, my whole world crumbled in a blink. Everything I'd counted on gone. Since then, I've just been trying to rebuild, to find something that can't be taken so easily." Her honesty pierced him. "I know that feeling too well." "I know you do," she said softly. "That's why I feel tied to you and to Luke." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Today in the store, Luke asked me if I was going to be his new mother." Cole's breath caught. "What did you tell him?" "I told him no one could ever replace his mother," Clara said carefully. "But that I cared for him, for both of you, and that I'd stay as long as you wanted me here." Moonlight glistened on the tears brimming in her eyes, turning them into stars. Cole stepped closer without thinking. "And if we do want you to stay?" His voice was low, unsteady. Her lips parted, eyes searching his face. "Cole." He took her hands, marveling at how small and warm they felt. "I'm not proposing not yet. Too soon for that. But when Luke asks if you can stay, truth is I've been asking myself the same thing." A single tear slipped down her cheek. Without thought, Cole brushed it away, just as he had that smudge of dirt in the garden. This time she didn't look away. This time his touch lingered his palm, cupping her cheek with a tenderness that stole her breath. "I never thought I'd find this," Clara Monroe whispered. "When I came here, I was only searching for work, for a place to belong." "And have you found it?" Cole Dawson asked, his chest-tight heart pounding. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she leaned close until their foreheads touched. "I think I might have," she breathed. Beneath the silver Montana moon, with spring's fragrance drifting on the night air, Cole kissed Clara for the first time. It was soft, uncertain, and achingly sweet, a promise of what could be rather than an ending. When they finally drew apart, both breathless Cole saw in her eyes the same fragile hope stirring in his own heart. "We ought to take this slow," he murmured, still holding her hands as though he'd never let go. "For Luke's sake, and ours." Clara nodded through her tears, smiling. Slowly she agreed, but together. The weeks slid gently into summer days long and full of chores, evenings rich with laughter and quiet moments. Their bond deepened step by step. Kisses grew more sure, though they remained careful to live proper under the same roof. Luke Dawson, however, was far from blind to it. His joy at seeing his father and Clara grow close was plain in his bright smile, and the way he eagerly pulled them both into every small adventure. By late June, Annabelle's old garden was alive again under Clara's care. Yellow roses bloomed strong, filling the air with their sweet perfume, as Clara and Luke spent afternoons among them, reading or tending the soil. Cole found himself watching often, no longer seeing only what he had lost, but what he had found anew. Clara was not Annabelle. She was steadier, more thoughtful with her own quiet strength and stubborn gentleness. One July evening, fireflies rose in the dusk, and Cole made his choice. He had carried his mother's ring in his pocket for days, waiting for the right time. Luke had gone to bed worn out from a long day of chores, and Clara sat on the porch in what had become their nightly habit. "I've been thinking," Cole began, taking her hand. "Back in May you spoke about finding a place to belong." Her amber eyes softened. "I remember." "Well," he said, drawing a breath, "I know now your place is here with us, with me." He pulled the small gold band from his pocket, the pearl glinting in the twilight. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it, as my wife." Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with tears. "Clara, I love you," Cole said simply. "Not in the same way I loved Annabelle. No one could replace her. But this love is just as real, just as true. You've brought light back to Luke and me. You've made this ranch a home again. And if you'll have me, I want to spend my life making you as happy as you've made us." Her tears spilled freely, her smile radiant. "Yes," she whispered, voice shaking. "Oh yes, Cole. I love you both, you and Luke, more than I ever dreamed I could." When he slid the ring onto her finger, Cole felt a sense of rightness, of wholeness. This was not replacing the past, but building a future upon it. "Should we tell Luke in the morning?" Clara asked, admiring the pearl glowing in the fading light. Cole smiled, thinking of his boy's wide grin. "I reckon he's been waiting for this longer than either of us." They were wed on a golden August day under an arbor Cole had built beside Annabelle's garden, a bridge between what had been and what was yet to come. Marshal Seth Carver read the vows, and half the town turned out. Luke stood proud as his father's best man face solemn until the words husband and wife were spoken. Then his grin split wide, his joy plain as day. Clara wore a simple cream dress, wildflowers braided in her loose hair at Cole's request. As she spoke her vows steady and sure, her gaze never left his, and Cole knew Annabelle would have wanted this happiness for him and for their son. The celebration lasted late, with music, laughter, and dancing beneath lanterns. Caleb Thornton brought cider, and Evelyn Pike, who had delayed her journey west, baked a grand cake. When the last guest was gone, and Luke had finally been coaxed to bed despite yawns, Cole and Clara stood on the porch of what was now truly their home. "Mrs. Dawson," he said softly, drawing her close. "How does that sound?" "Perfect," she murmured against his chest. "Absolutely perfect." Later in the room, transformed by her touch, new curtains, a hand-stitched quilt, wildflowers on the dresser, Clara lay with her head on his shoulder. The place no longer felt like a shrine to loss, but a sanctuary for new life. "What are you thinking?" she whispered, tracing lazy circles on his chest. "That I'm the luckiest man in the Montana Territory," he answered honestly. "And that I never thought I'd feel this way again." Her gaze was steady, serious. "I'll never try to replace Annabelle in Luke's heart or yours. She'll always be part of you both, as she should be." "You're not replacing anyone," Cole said, pulling her closer. "You're adding to us, making us whole in a new way." She smiled softly. "I like that thought." As sleep finally stole over them, Cole reflected on the journey from grief's darkest valley to this unexpected love-renewed family and the promise of a future brighter than he'd ever dared to hope. With Clara Monroe by his side and Luke Dawson thriving under both their care, Cole Dawson looked toward the future, not with dread or loneliness, but with hope and quiet gratitude. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and blessings. The modest ranch grew under their combined efforts, Clara proving herself sharp in business, while Cole lent his steady hand and hard-earned skill in the saddle and the fields. Together they expanded the herd, coaxed better yields from the land, and even began raising horses, a venture that soon became one of their proudest successes. Luke grew tall and strong, his sharp mind shaped by Clara's steady teaching and Cole's patient guidance. By the time he turned 12, his learning impressed even the new school teacher in Pinecrest, where a proper schoolhouse now stood. Their greatest joy came with the birth of a daughter a year after their wedding. They named her Maggie Dawson in honor of what had come before, and from the start, Luke claimed her as his charge and champion. The first time he cradled her in his arms, he declared solemnly, "I'll keep her safe, Pa. Always." "She has your eyes," Cole murmured to Clara one night, watching the baby sleep in the wooden cradle he had built through the long winter evenings. "And your smile," Clara countered softly, resting against him. exhausted yet radiant. And Luke's curiosity, too. Did you see the way she was studying the room as if she already wanted to know everything? Cole chuckled. She's not a day old, Clara. That's a bit early. Just wait, she insisted with a knowing grin. She's going to be a force of her own. And she was right. Maggie grew into a lively, headstrong child filled with mischief and determination, shadowing Luke wherever he went and demanding to be included in all he did. By the autumn of 1883, 5 years after Clara first stepped onto their porch, Cole stood at the edge of the orchard they'd planted together, watching the life they had built. Luke, now 12, and nearly as tall as his father, was carefully guiding little Maggie in gathering the last apples of the season, steadying the basket as she dropped them in one by one. Clara moved nearby, her hands busy among the vegetable rows, auburn hair touched with threads of silver, her movements as graceful as the day she'd arrived. She looked up, catching his gaze, and smiled the same smile that had slowly mended his broken heart. Wiping her hands, she came to his side, slipping her arm into his. "What's got you looking so thoughtful?" she teased gently. "Just counting my blessings," Cole replied, covering her hand with his. "Never thought I'd have all this again." Clara leaned against him. "Neither did I. After Samuel died, I thought that chapter of my life was gone forever." A widowed cowboy and his boy Cole said, a smile tugging at his lips. "A family," Clara corrected softly. "A real home. A place I never dreamed I'd belong." From the garden came Maggie's delighted shout, as Luke lifted her high onto his shoulders, her curls bouncing as she crowed, "Look, Pa, I'm taller than everyone. Careful with your sister, Luke," Clara called, though her voice held no worry, only affection. "Always, Ma," he answered, the name slipping from him naturally, as it had ever since Maggie's birth. Cole's chest ached with gratitude so deep it nearly stole his breath. He glanced at Clara. "Thank you." She tilted her head, curious. "For what?" "For taking a chance on us. For bringing kindness back into our lives when we needed it most. For staying." Her amber eyes shimmered with quiet emotion. "Thank you for letting me." As the Montana sun poured its golden light across the land and their children's laughter filled the autumn air, Cole Dawson knew a peace deeper than he'd ever imagined. The grief of the past would always be part of him, but Clara had taught him that love was not a thing that ran out. It grew, making room for new joys without dimming what had come before. Hand in hand, they walked toward the cabin, now truly a home once more. And in Cole's heart, he gave thanks for second chances, for love reborn, and for the life he never thought he'd live again. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.